Tsunami warning possible in South Mexico of us. At least 5 people are dead after a strong magnitude 8.1 earthquake struck off the southern coast of Mexico, shaking buildings in the capital city and spurring tsunami warnings for waves up to 3 meters high. People in Mexico City ran out into the streets after the quake struck at about 11:49 p.m. local time, as power went out in some neighborhoods. In the suburb of La Roma, dozens of people stared at their phones in the dark to get news, while videos posted to social media showed power poles and monuments swaying as the earthquake struck. At least 3 people in the southern state of Chiapas were killed, including 2 women who were crushed when buildings crumbled, said the state's governor Manuel Velázquez. 2 others, both children, died in the neighboring state of Tabasco. Tabasco Governor Arturo Núñez said one of the children was killed by a falling wall, while the other was on a ventilator in hospital and died when the hospital lost power. The quake's epicenter was 87 kilometers southwest of the town of Pijijiapan, at a depth of 69.7 kilometers. Mexico, closest to the earthquake's epicenter, was expected to get tsunami waves of 3 meters or higher, with waves due to impact the coast from 12:40 am local time. Hours after the quake, waves of 1 meter had been detected on the Mexican coast. Tsunami waves reaching up to 1 meter above the tide level were possible for American Samoa, Antarctica, the Cook Islands, Ecuador, El Salvador, Fiji, French Polynesia, Guatemala, Kiribati, New Zealand, Samoa, Tokelau, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and the islands of Wallis and Futuna. The PTWC said. Waves of less than 30 centimeters above the tide line could impact some coasts of Australia, Chile, China, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guam, Hawaii, Honduras, Indonesia, Japan, Nauru, New Caledonia, Nicaragua, Panama, Papua New Guinea, Peru, the Philippines, Russia, Taiwan, Tonga, and Vietnam. Government agencies responsible for threatened coastal areas should take action to inform and instruct any coastal populations at risk in accordance with their own evaluation procedures and the level of threat. Persons located in threatened coastal areas should stay alert for information and follow instructions from national and local authorities. As the waves began to impact, they were detected on coastal tide gauges. The PTWC warned residents a tsunami is a series of waves, and the time between wave crests could vary from 5 minutes to an hour. The hazard may persist for many hours or longer after the initial wave, the organization's warning said. Mexico's Civil Protection Agency said their earthquake was the strongest to hit the country since a devastating 1985 tremor that toppled 400 buildings and killed thousands. As many as 10,000 people were killed in that quake, measuring magnitude 8, which resulted in Mexico City's construction codes becoming more strict. This earthquake's magnitude was initially given as 8. Before it was revised upwards by the U.S. Geological Survey. The USGS reported multiple aftershocks, ranging in magnitude from 4.3 to 5.7. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center measured the earthquake as being magnitude 8.2. Luis Carlos Briceno, a 31-year-old architect who was visiting Mexico City, said he had never felt such a strong quake. I had never been anywhere where the earth moved so much, he said. At first I laughed, but when the lights went out I didn't know what to do. I nearly fell over. In neighboring Guatemala, the President Jimmy Morales called for calm amid tsunami warnings. The earthquake struck mainly in Guatemala's west, scattering bricks and glass on the ground in the state capital of Huehuetenango after walls collapsed. Guatemala's second-largest city, Quetzaltenango, which was beginning to recover from a tremor in June, sustained more damage to its historic center. Mexico hit by biggest quake in century, 5 killed. A major earthquake off Mexico's southern coast killed at least 5 people, with the president saying Friday it was the biggest in a century to hit the country. Houses toppled and the quake produced tsunami waves and sent people running into the streets in panic. The U.S. Geological Survey reported the earthquake's magnitude as 8.1, but President Enrique Peña Nieto says it was 8.2, making it the largest in Mexico in 100 years. He also said it was bigger than the one in 1985, when thousands were killed in 4 Mexican states. It was a large-scale earthquake, Peña Nieto said. It had a bigger magnitude than the one Mexicans knew in 1985. He said that 62 aftershocks followed the quake and it's possible one as strong as 7.2 could hit in the next 24 hours. Peña Nieto also said that serious damage had been caused, and that 1 million customers initially had been without power following the quake, but that electricity had been restored to 800,000 of them. The USGS said the quake struck at 11:49 p.m. Thursday local time and its epicenter was 165 kilometers west of Tapachula in Chiapas, not far from Guatemala. It had a depth of 69.7 kilometers. The quake was so strong that it caused buildings to sway violently in Mexico's capital more than 1,000 kilometers away. Residents fled buildings, many in their pajamas, and gathered in frightened groups in the street. Some neighborhoods remained in darkness after electricity was knocked out. The house moved like chewing gum and the light and internet went out momentarily, said Rodrigo Soberanes, who lives near San Cristobal de las Casas in Chiapas, a poor, largely indigenous state popular with tourists. Chiapas Governor Manuel Velasco said that 3 people were killed in San Cristobal, including 2 women who died when a house and a wall collapsed. He called on people living near the coast to leave their houses as a protective measure. There is damage to hospitals that have lost energy, he said. Homes, schools and hospitals have been damaged. Tabasco Governor Arturo Núñez said 2 children had died in his state. One of them was killed when a wall collapsed, and the other was a baby who died in a children's hospital that lost electricity, cutting off their infant's ventilator. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center says waves of 1 meter above the tide level were measured off Salina Cruz, Mexico. Smaller tsunami waves were observed on the coast or measured by ocean gauges in several other places. The center's forecast said Ecuador, El Salvador and Guatemala could see waves of 1 meter or less. No threat was posed to Hawaii and the Western and South Pacific. Civil Defense in Chiapas said on its Twitter account that its personnel were in the streets, aiding people and warned residents to prepare for aftershocks. In neighboring Guatemala, President Jimmy Morales spoke on national television to call for calm while emergency crews checked for damage. We have reports of some damage and the death of 1 person, even though we still don't have details, Morales said. He said the unconfirmed death occurred in San Marcos State near their border with Mexico. Lucy Jones, a seismologist in California who works with the U.S. Geological Survey, said such a quake was to be expected. Off the west coast of Mexico is what's called the subduction zone. The Pacific Plate is moving under the Mexican peninsula, she said. It's a very flat fault, so it's a place that has big earthquakes relatively often because of that. There's likely to be a small tsunami going to the southwest. It's not going to be coming up and affecting California or Hawaii, she said. For tsunami generation, an 8 is relatively small. Tsunami confirmed after 8.1 magnitude quake kills 5. A magnitude 8.1 earthquake has struck off the coast of Mexico, leaving at least 5 people dead, sparking mass evacuations and prompting warnings of tsunamis across the region. The quake occurred 165 kilometers west of the state of Chiapas just before midnight on Thursday local time, and was said to be the strongest earthquake to hit the country since 1985, according to the Civil Protection Agency. 3 people were confirmed dead in Chiapas, and 2 in Tabasco State, as their Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said waves as high as 3 meters could strike the coast. The Tabasco governor, Arturo Núñez, said the 2 killed were children. 1 died after a wall collapsed and the other was a baby who died in a children's hospital that lost electricity. Mexico's President, Enrique Peña Nieto, said he had asked for updates from the National Disaster Prevention Center, adding that the authorities were monitoring the situation and would meet immediately to determine their response to the quake. In a series of tweets, he added that schools would be closed for the day. In Mexico City, the state of Mexico, Chiapas, Hidalgo, Veracruz, Guerrero, Tabasco, Oaxaca, Puebla, and Tlaxcala. He said the suspension of class would allow experts to determine the damage to schools. Rodrigo Soberanes, who lives near San Cristobal de las Casas in Chiapas, told the Associated Press his house had moved like chewing gum in the quake. The governor of Chiapas, Manuel Velasco, said the roofs of homes and a shopping center had collapsed in San Cristobal. Hospitals have lost energy, he said. Homes, schools and hospitals have been affected. Reports also suggested that a hotel in the south of the country was among the buildings that suffered severe damage, with rescuers searching for trapped people. Windows were broken at Mexico City Airport and power went out in several neighborhoods of the capital. The cornice of a hotel collapsed in the southern tourist city of Oaxaca, a witness said. People in the capital, one of the world's largest cities, ran out into the streets in pajamas and alarms sounded after the quake struck just before midnight, a Reuters witness said. Helicopters hovered overhead a few minutes later, apparently looking for damage to buildings in the city, while a viral video showed the iconic Angel de la Independencia monument swaying as it was bathed in green light. In one central neighborhood, dozens of people stood outside after the quake, some wrapped in blankets against the cool night air. Children were crying. Liliana Villa, 35, was in her apartment when the earthquake struck and she fled to the street in her pajamas. It felt horrible, and I thought, this is going to fall. Luis Carlos Briceno, a 31-year-old architect visiting Mexico City, said I had never been anywhere where the earth moved so much. At first I laughed, but when the lights went out I didn't know what to do. I nearly fell over. The tremor is possibly the strongest to shake the country since 1985, when a magnitude 8.0 earthquake leveled large portions of the capital. Much of Mexico City was built on the soft soil of a former lakebed, leaving it vulnerable to earthquakes. Building codes have been tightened since 1985, while earthquake drills for apartment dwellers and office workers in Mexico City have become common in recent years. Public officials were quick to update the public on damage and provide instructions, unlike 1985, when the country's politicians went missing in action and residents, many left homeless, fended for themselves and teamed up to pull people out of piles of rubble. Initial waves 1 meter over tide level were recorded at their Mexican city of Salina Cruz by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. They predicted waves between 0.3 and 1 meters for the Cook Islands, Ecuador, El Salvador, Fiji, French Polynesia, Guatemala, and Kiribati. Waves below 0.3 meters were forecast for countries as far as Australia, Japan, and Vietnam. The tsunami threat to Hawaii, Guam, and American Samoa was ruled out. A powerful 8.1 magnitude earthquake struck off the southern coast of Mexico late Thursday night, killing at least 6 people and setting off tsunami warnings along the Pacific coast. Mexican authorities alerted the coastal states of Oaxaca and Chiapas of the possibility of destructive waves of higher than 13 feet. So far, though the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center had only reported waves of about 3 feet off the coast of Mexico.